Thomas Alva Edison was born on February 11, 1847, in a small town called Milan, Ohio. Nothing about his beginnings suggested that he would one day become one of the greatest inventors in history, a man whose name would be remembered for centuries. He was the youngest of 7 children in a modest family, and his father struggled to keep the household financially stable. Unlike many who are celebrated from birth, Edison's early life was filled not with glory, but with challenges that could have easily broken his spirit before his journey even began. From the very beginning, Edison showed signs of curiosity, asking endless questions, constantly distracted, and never content with the simple answers adults gave him. This made him a difficult student in the eyes of his teachers. In fact, his teachers often described him as addled and incapable of learning. One teacher even told young Thomas he would never succeed at anything. Imagine, at such a tender age, being told that your mind was broken, that your future was worthless. For many children, that would have been the end of ambition, the crushing of potential before it had the chance to bloom. But this was where the story of Edison took a remarkable turn. His mother, Nancy Edison, refused to accept that label for her son. Instead of letting her boy grow under the shadow of rejection, she pulled him out of school and began teaching him at home. She taught him not only basic subjects but also filled him with confidence, reminding him that he was capable of greatness if only he nurtured his curiosity and worked hard. Edison later admitted that his mother was the making of him, saying, "My mother was the making of me. She was so true, so sure of me, and I felt I had someone to live for, someone I must not disappoint." It was this unwavering belief from his mother that planted the seed of courage and curiosity inside Edison's heart, a seed that would grow stronger with every passing year. Instead of being crushed by society's judgment, he was lifted by a mother's faith. This turning point reminds us all of a vital truth. The world may try to define us, but it is the people who believe in us and the belief we carry within ourselves that truly shapes our destiny. Edison's beginning teaches us that we are not bound by the labels others give us. You may be underestimated, doubted, or even called a failure by those around you, but your story does not have to end there. Every great journey begins with a single spark of belief, and for Edison, that spark came from his mother's unwavering faith. And so, from the ashes of rejection, a new path began to form, one that would eventually lead a boy once considered too stupid to learn to become the man who lit up the entire world. As Thomas grew older, the seeds of curiosity planted by his mother began to grow into a restless fire. He was not like other children who played with toys and left them intact. Edison wanted to know how everything worked, from clocks to gadgets to simple household objects. He would often take things apart, examining their pieces and trying to put them back together, not always successfully, but always learning. This curiosity sometimes made him appear mischievous, but to Edison, it was the only way he could understand the world. By the age of 12, he was not just a boy with questions, he was a boy with ambitions. To help his family financially, Edison took a job selling newspapers, fruits, and candy on the Grand Trunk Railroad trains that ran between Port Huron and Detroit. But unlike the other boys who simply sold what they were given, Edison's imagination saw an opportunity. Instead of only selling existing newspapers, he decided to create his own. In a small corner of the train, he set up a miniature printing press and began producing his very own newspaper, the Grand Trunk Herald. It became a hit with passengers and is remembered as the very first newspaper ever printed on a moving train. Think about that. While other boys were focused on making a few coins, Edison was already shaping himself into an entrepreneur, innovator, and creator. At 12 years old, he was learning lessons that most adults never dared to practice, lessons of initiative, vision, and courage. His train business grew, and soon he was earning far more than an average boy of his age. But Edison was not satisfied with just selling goods or newspapers. He began using his earnings to fund his experiments. He converted a corner of the baggage car into a tiny laboratory, where he carried bottles, wires, chemicals, and tools. Conducting experiments on a moving train was risky and often messy, but Edison was unstoppable. One day, one of his experiments caused a chemical fire in the baggage car, and he was thrown off the train, ending his small lab business there. For most, that would have been an embarrassing failure. For Edison, it was simply another lesson in a long journey of trial and error. He laughed at his mistakes, learned what not to do, and carried his hunger for invention wherever he went. His curiosity was not limited to science. He was fascinated by human needs, by the problems people faced in their daily lives. He believed every problem had a solution if one only looked at it closely enough. This relentless drive to question, to create, to test, and to risk failure became the foundation of his character. It was during these teenage years that Edison showed the world a glimpse of what was to come, a boy who refused to be ordinary, a boy who saw opportunities in places others never even looked. His story during these years reminds us of something powerful. Greatness begins not when you achieve something monumental, but when you dare to follow your curiosity and act on it. Edison's train newspaper, his makeshift lab, his fearless experiments all were small steps, but together they were the preparation for a future that would one day illuminate the world. What others called childish distraction was actually the birth of genius. And just as every great tree begins as a tiny seed, the unstoppable force that was Thomas Edison was already beginning to grow strong roots, fed by curiosity, resilience, and an imagination that refused to rest. As Edison grew into his teenage years, his path was not smooth, and life reminded him that even the brightest curiosity comes with trials. While working on the trains and continuing his experiments, Edison experienced a life-changing event. One day, an accident aboard the train injured his ears severely. Some accounts say a conductor struck him after one of his experiments caused a fire. Others mention recurring untreated ear infections. Whatever the true cause, the result was the same. Edison lost a great deal of his hearing, and over time, he became almost completely deaf. Imagine being a young boy with so much energy, so much love for sound and invention, and suddenly hearing less and less of the world around you. For most people, this would have been a devastating blow. To live in a world where voices grew faint, where music became distant, where even the rustle of leaves in the wind could no longer be heard, such silence could have crushed his spirit. But not Thomas Edison. Instead of sinking into despair, he looked at his deafness in a new way. He once remarked that his loss of hearing helped him concentrate, removing distractions and allowing him to focus entirely on his experiments. What others would call a disability, he transformed into an advantage. This was Edison's genius, not just in creating inventions, but in turning obstacles into opportunities. He refused to see himself as a victim. He saw himself as someone uniquely equipped to focus on his purpose. During this time, Edison also worked as a telegraph operator, learning the intricacies of the telegraph system and becoming fascinated with communication technology. He often took night shifts, which gave him long, uninterrupted hours to conduct experiments. His co-workers would see him tinkering, scribbling notes, and working with wires while others rested. The silence of his world became the background music to his determination. But success was still far away. Many of his early inventions failed or went unnoticed. He faced poverty, long nights of hunger, and rejection from those who thought he was wasting his time. Yet Edison never surrendered. He believed, deeply and stubbornly, that each failure was simply a lesson guiding him to the next breakthrough. His deafness did not define him, his response to it did. This chapter of his life reminds us that the world may take something away from us, health, comfort, opportunities, but what truly matters is how we choose to respond. Edison could have chosen to see himself as broken, to give up and fade into the background of history. Instead, he chose to see his trial as training, his silence as strength, his hardship as preparation. He carried on with relentless persistence, showing us all that our greatest challenges can become the very tools that shape our destiny. As Edison stepped deeper into the world of invention, he discovered a truth that every dreamer must eventually face: failure is a constant companion on the path to greatness. His mind overflowed with ideas, and his hands were constantly building, testing, and reshaping devices, but more often than not, those ideas collapsed before they could succeed. He experimented with machines to count votes, but politicians rejected them. He worked on devices to separate iron from dirt, investing heavily in the project, only to watch it collapse into financial disaster. He opened businesses that went bankrupt, and he lost the hard-earned money of investors who had trusted him. Factories he built to bring his dreams to life often ended in ashes, literally, as fires consumed his workshops. Many nights, Edison sat surrounded by broken wires, failed prototypes, and the crushing weight of disappointment. Most people, after so many failures, would have given up, admitting that perhaps they were chasing the impossible. But Edison refused to see failure as the enemy. He saw it as a teacher. To him, each experiment that didn't work was not wasted effort, it was progress. He was eliminating one more wrong path, narrowing down the way to success. When people mocked him for wasting time on experiments that never seemed to work, Edison smiled and answered with words that continue to inspire the world: "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This attitude separated him from the ordinary. Where others saw defeat, he saw data. Where others saw a dead end, he saw direction. To Edison, failure was not the opposite of success, it was part of success. His resilience was not passive, it was active. Each morning, he rose with fresh determination, returning to his workshop to face another day of trial and error, never letting the weight of yesterday's failures crush the hope of today's attempts. And slowly, very slowly, those countless failures began to shape the foundation of something greater. He was learning, improving, sharpening his mind and hands for the moment when one of his ideas would finally change the world. Edison's journey through failure is a reminder for all of us. Dreams are not built in a straight line, they are carved through setbacks, losses, and rejections. The only true failure is giving up, and Edison never did. His life during these years shines as proof that persistence, even in the face of repeated defeat, is the key that unlocks the door to destiny. What burned in Edison's heart was a fire that no failure could extinguish, and that fire was preparing him for the invention that would illuminate the entire planet. By the late 1870s, Thomas Edison had faced enough failures to make most men surrender their dreams, yet he stood stronger than ever, burning with one goal that had gripped his imagination: to create a reliable, affordable, and long-lasting source of light. For centuries, human beings had depended on candles and oil lamps to push back the darkness. Streets, homes, and businesses all fell under the rule of night once the sun set, and the world had accepted it as the way life must be. But Edison refused to accept limitations. He envisioned a world where light could shine at the flip of a switch, where darkness could be defeated not by fire, but by electricity. This vision was not a simple dream, it was a monumental challenge. Countless inventors before him had tried and failed to create a practical electric lamp. Some produced bulbs that flickered briefly before dying, Others made lamps that were too costly to ever reach the common man. The world mocked Edison's ambition, saying he was chasing the impossible, but Edison had already learned to ignore doubters. He began an endless series of experiments, searching for the perfect material for the filament, the tiny part of the bulb that glows when electricity runs through it. He and his team tested one material after another: platinum, cotton, linen, even horsehair. Each attempt ended in failure. Some filaments burned out in seconds, others melted instantly, and many shattered the glass bulbs altogether. Yet Edison never wavered. Each failure, in his eyes, was progress. Every broken bulb brought him closer to the answer. He often worked through the night, his workshop glowing with the faint flashes of failed bulbs, his team exhausted but unwilling to quit because their leader never showed despair. And then, after thousands of trials, came the breakthrough. In 1879, Edison discovered that a filament made from carbonized bamboo could burn for hours, far longer than any material tested before. When the bulb glowed steadily without dying, Edison knew the world had changed forever. News spread like wildfire, and people gathered to witness the miracle of light that could be summoned at will. No longer would mankind live at the mercy of candles and kerosene. For the first time in history, humans had the power to hold the sun in their hands. This was not just an invention, it was a revolution. The light bulb transformed homes, factories, and cities, extending working hours, increasing productivity, and reshaping the very rhythm of human life. The world could now move beyond the boundaries of daylight, all because one man refused to quit after thousands of failures. Edison's light bulb became a symbol of human determination, a shining reminder that persistence can turn even the wildest dream into reality. His journey to that glowing bulb is one of the greatest lessons in history. Success is rarely the result of one brilliant idea, it is the reward of relentless effort, unshakable belief, and the courage to keep going when others give up. The birth of the light bulb was the birth of a new age, and Thomas Edison, the boy once told he was too slow to learn, had lit up the entire world. After the triumph of the light bulb, Thomas Edison could have stopped. He could have rested on his success, celebrated his achievement, and lived the rest of his life in comfort. But Edison was not driven by comfort, he was driven by an unquenchable thirst for creation. He understood something that few inventors of his time realized: invention was not a one-time miracle, it could be a system, a process, a way of life. Out of this understanding was born Menlo Park, a place that would come to be known as the world's first invention factory. In 1876, Edison established his research laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, and what he built there was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was not just a workshop, it was a center of relentless innovation, a place where dreams were tested, broken, and rebuilt until they became reality. Edison surrounded himself with a team of brilliant assistants and machinists, men who shared his hunger for discovery. They worked long days and often through the nights, inspired by their leader's tireless energy. It was said that Edison could work for 72 hours straight without sleep, fueled only by his passion and his unstoppable drive. Menlo Park became a symbol of invention. Within those walls, more than 400 patents were born. From improvements to the light bulb to groundbreaking work in electricity, sound recording, and motion pictures, the ideas seemed endless. Visitors described Menlo Park as a place where the impossible was constantly being challenged, where failure was expected but never feared, where invention was treated like an art form. Edison himself called it his factory of imagination. One of the most remarkable aspects of Menlo Park was Edison's approach to teamwork. He did not believe that genius had to be solitary. Instead, he believed that minds working together could achieve miracles. He led his men not just by orders, but by example, rolling up his sleeves and laboring beside them. He taught them that invention was not about sudden flashes of inspiration, it was about persistence, discipline, and thousands of small improvements. He often reminded them, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Those words, born in Menlo Park, have since inspired countless dreamers to understand that talent alone is never enough. It is hard work that brings ideas to life. The world soon took notice of what was happening in that little lab in New Jersey. Newspapers called Edison the Wizard of Menlo Park, and people began to see him not just as an inventor, but as a magician of science who could bend the laws of nature into human service. Yet Edison always insisted that there was no magic, only hard work, curiosity, and persistence. Menlo Park was a living demonstration of what could be achieved when people refused to accept limits. This chapter of Edison's life carries a powerful lesson. Greatness is not built on one success. It is built on a system of continuous growth, on surrounding yourself with people who share your vision, and on never allowing achievement to make you complacent. Menlo Park shows us that innovation is not luck, it is discipline. It is not the gift of a few chosen ones, but the reward of those who dare to dream and then work endlessly to bring those dreams to life. Edison turned a small lab into the birthplace of a new age, and from the hum of Menlo Park, the modern world began to take shape. At Menlo Park, inventions seemed to appear as if from a fountain that never dried up, and among the many creations that emerged, one stood out as both astonishing and unexpected: the phonograph. In 1877, while experimenting with ways to record messages for the telegraph and telephone, Edison stumbled upon an idea that would forever change the way humans experienced sound. What if the human voice itself could be captured and played back, preserved like a memory frozen in time? It was a thought so extraordinary that many dismissed it as fantasy, yet Edison set out to make it real. He designed a machine that used a tinfoil-covered cylinder and a needle. When someone spoke into the machine, the vibrations of their voice etched grooves into the foil. By running the needle over those grooves again, the sound could be reproduced. The world had never seen anything like it. The first words Edison recorded were simple yet historic: "Mary had a little lamb." And when the machine played his voice back, the people around him were stunned. They could hardly believe their ears. Sound, once spoken and gone forever, had now been captured and returned to life. The phonograph was a miracle to those who witnessed it. Newspapers hailed Edison as a wizard, a man who could make voices live beyond the moment they were spoken. For the first time in history, music could be recorded and replayed, speeches could be preserved, and voices of the past could speak to the future. Imagine the wonder of a family in the 1800s hearing their own laughter replayed, or a piece of music performed once and then listened to again and again. It was as if Edison had given humanity a way to bend time itself. Yet Edison, true to his nature, saw the phonograph not as a finished masterpiece but as the beginning of 1,000 possibilities. He envisioned it being used for dictation in offices, for preserving important documents, for teaching languages, and even for recording the voices of loved ones to be cherished after they were gone. Though the machine would go through many improvements and face competition from other inventors, Edison's phonograph marked the dawn of the sound recording industry, laying the foundation for everything from record players to radios, from cassette tapes to digital music. What is most remarkable is not just the invention itself, but the mindset behind it. Edison was not searching for entertainment or applause, he was solving problems, exploring curiosities, and asking questions others never dared to ask. The phonograph teaches us that innovation often comes not from chasing fame, but from chasing possibilities. When you pursue curiosity with determination, You may create something the world never knew it needed but will never again want to live without. The invention of the phonograph reminds us of a powerful truth. Your ideas, no matter how strange or impossible they may seem, have the potential to reshape the future. People may laugh, doubt, or dismiss them, but the courage to try, to build, to test, is what separates dreamers from doors. Edison did not just invent a machine, he gave voice to imagination itself, and in doing so, he taught us that the sound of persistence is louder than the noise of doubt. As Edison grew older, the restless boy who once sold newspapers on a train had become a man whose name was etched into the very heart of human progress. By the time he entered his later years, Thomas Edison held over 1,000 patents, a number so immense that it seemed almost impossible for a single person to achieve. From the phonograph to the electric light, from motion pictures to batteries, his fingerprints were on technologies that touched nearly every aspect of daily life. He had transformed not only industries but also the rhythm of society itself. Where once nights had been governed by the darkness of candles and oil lamps, cities now glowed with electric light. Where once voices vanished into the air, now they could be recorded, replayed, and remembered forever. Where once entertainment was fleeting, motion pictures brought stories to millions. Edison had not merely invented machines, he had reshaped the way humanity lived, worked, and dreamed. But Edison's later years were not without reflection. Though his name was celebrated across the world, his body bore the marks of a life of endless labor. His hearing, poor since childhood, grew worse with age, and yet he continued to work, communicating through written notes and lip reading. He spent long hours in his laboratories, surrounded by younger assistants, always pushing, always experimenting, always driven by curiosity. Unlike many men who retire into comfort, Edison could not imagine life without invention. For him, work was not a burden, it was life itself. He also became a mentor and inspiration to the next generation of dreamers. Younger inventors, entrepreneurs, and scientists looked to him not only for his brilliance but for his persistence. They saw a man who had faced poverty, rejection, rivalry, loss, and yet had never abandoned the pursuit of progress. Edison's story was no longer just about machines, it was about the mindset of never giving up. As he aged, the world around him changed rapidly. Airplanes soared through the skies, radios carried voices across continents, and automobiles filled the streets. Many of these advances were built on foundations Edison had helped lay. His dear friend Henry Ford, the father of modern automobiles, admired him deeply and even moved Edison's last laboratory and home to Michigan to preserve them as monuments of innovation. Such was the respect Edison commanded not just as an inventor, but as a symbol of resilience and possibility. In his sunset years, Edison often spoke of curiosity as the secret fuel of life. He believed that one should never stop asking questions, never stop experimenting, never stop reaching for more. He once said, "The greatest invention in the world is the mind of a child." These words reflected the very spirit that carried him through, because even as an old man, Edison never let go of that childlike wonder that made him ask, "What if?" When he finally passed away in 1931, at the age of 84, the world mourned as if it had lost not just a man, but a guiding light. Newspapers across the globe paid tribute to him. In one of the most moving gestures of respect, lights were dimmed in cities across America for a few moments, honoring the man who had given light to the world. It was a silence of brilliance, a pause of gratitude, a reminder that Edison's spark would continue to glow long after his physical presence had faded. His legacy was not just the inventions he left behind, but the lesson his life taught, that greatness is built not in moments of ease, but in years of persistence. Edison showed the world that genius is not some gift bestowed at birth, it is the result of curiosity, resilience, and relentless effort. His story lives as proof that as Edison's fame grew, so did his challenges. Success is never a straight road, it always attracts rivals, critics, and storms that test the strength of one's spirit. By the late 1880s, Edison had become a household name, the Wizard of Menlo Park, the man who gave light to the world, the genius who had captured sound. Yet even for a man of his brilliance, life was far from easy. For every victory, there came new struggles, new fires to walk through. One of the greatest battles Edison faced was the war of currents. Edison strongly supported direct current, DC, electricity, the system he had developed and worked tirelessly to promote. But another brilliant mind, Nikola Tesla, working alongside businessman George Westinghouse, championed alternating current, AC. Tesla's system promised to transmit power over long distances, something Edison's DC struggled to achieve. What began as a difference in technical opinion soon erupted into a public war. Edison poured his energy into discrediting AC, going as far as demonstrating its dangers in shocking displays. Newspapers turned it into a spectacle, and Edison, once admired as a pure inventor, was criticized for his tactics. This rivalry scarred his reputation, teaching him a painful truth that genius alone is not enough in the world of business and competition. And yet, Edison did not allow this conflict to end him. He pressed forward, continuing to innovate in countless other fields, creating better storage batteries, motion picture cameras, and improved versions of the phonograph. For him, one battle lost did not mean the war of life was over. Edison understood that sometimes you can be right, sometimes you can be wrong, but the greatest defeat is quitting altogether. He never let pride, criticism, or even rivalry silence the inventor inside him. But rivalries were not his only struggles. In 1914, when Edison was already a global icon, tragedy struck his life in the most devastating way. A massive fire broke out in his West Orange laboratory complex, destroying years of experiments, valuable prototypes, and equipment worth millions of dollars. Flames lit up the night sky, and Edison, then in his late 60s, stood watching his life's work vanish in smoke. For most people, such a loss would have meant the end. Imagine giving decades of your life to something, only to see it turned to ashes in a matter of hours. Reporters rushed to ask Edison how he felt, expecting him to be crushed, broken, defeated. But Edison's response was one of extraordinary resilience. He looked at the ruins and said, "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up. Now we can start again fresh." This response was not denial, it was strength. Edison understood a lesson that too many people forget. Things can be destroyed, but vision cannot. Fire can consume buildings, but it cannot consume determination. Loss can take away possessions, but it cannot take away passion. That very night, Edison began making plans to rebuild. Within weeks, he was back at work, creating new projects, proving that the true measure of a person is not how they act in times of comfort, but how they rise from the ashes of disaster. These struggles, the rivalry with Tesla and Westinghouse, the devastating fire, the endless criticism, were not signs of failure but signs of life. They showed that Edison was not a myth or a flawless genius but a man who faced storms like the rest of us. What set him apart was his refusal to let those storms drown his spirit. Through every rivalry, every setback, every loss, he stood firm with the same philosophy that had guided him since childhood: persistence conquers all. And so, Edison's story in these years became more than just about inventions. It became about character. He proved that greatness is not found in the absence of struggle but in the courage to keep moving forward when struggles come. His life was a flame that refused to be extinguished, no matter how fierce the winds blew against it. Ordinary beginnings can lead to extraordinary destinies if one refuses to quit. And so, as the sun set on Edison's life, it rose on a new era he had helped create. Every light bulb, every recorded voice, every movie screen carried within it a whisper of his determination. His name became eternal, not because he never failed, but because he refused to let failure have the final word. Thomas Edison's story is more than the tale of an inventor, it is the story of what is possible when determination becomes a way of life. Long after his passing, his name continues to echo, not simply because of the electric bulb, the phonograph, or the motion picture camera, but because of the spirit behind those inventions. His life stands as a mirror for every dreamer, every struggler, every person who has ever felt the sting of failure or the weight of doubt. Edison teaches us that success does not belong to the chosen few, it belongs to the persistent few. He was not born rich, he was not given privilege, and he faced challenges that could have silenced his dreams before they even began. He was partially deaf, often misunderstood, dismissed by teachers, and rejected by investors. Yet none of these became excuses to stop. Instead, they became reasons to keep going. Edison's life is proof that the size of your beginnings does not determine the size of your destiny. His journey reminds us that failure is not a sign that you are unworthy, it is the evidence that you are trying. Edison failed thousands of times, but he never called them failures, he called them steps. Each setback was a brick laid on the road to success. He showed us that the path to greatness is not a smooth highway but a rugged mountain trail, filled with stumbles, slips, and bruises. And yet, if you keep climbing, you will eventually see the sunrise from the peak. Edison also teaches the power of vision. When others saw darkness, he saw light. When others believed voices could never be preserved, he captured them. When others lived day to day, he dreamed of a future that did not yet exist. His inventions were not just machines, they were answers to questions people didn't even know how to ask. His life reminds us that imagination is not childish, it is the seed of progress. The future belongs to those who dare to imagine it first. But perhaps the greatest lesson Edison leaves us is that success is not measured by wealth, fame, or even recognition. Success is measured by the difference you make, by the lives you touch, by the courage you show in the face of struggle. Edison's work lit up cities, gave voices permanence, and brought stories to life on screen, but beyond all that, he lit up hearts with hope, showing that no dream is too big, no obstacle too heavy, no failure too final. And so, even today, every time you flip a light switch, play a song, or watch a movie, you are touching a piece of his legacy. His life whispers to us across time, keep going. Don't give up. The next attempt could be the one that changes everything. Thomas Edison's story does not end with his death, it continues in every dreamer who chooses persistence over surrender. His eternal lesson is clear: genius is not about never failing, it is about never quitting. And if you, like Edison, dare to keep moving forward despite the darkness, one day, your light too will shine for the world to see.